I'm still shaking as I sit here, staring at the walls of this silent house, my mind trapped in a single shattering moment, the moment my entire world cracked apart like thin glass. It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening. My wife, Emily, and I had spent the night at a corporate event she had been anticipating for weeks. She had gone the extra mile, picking out a sleek navy dress, carefully styling her hair, and flashing me that warm, familiar smile before we left home, the kind of smile that used to make me feel like the luckiest man alive. The event itself was as dull as expected. Polite small talk, the clinking of glasses, a catered dinner that barely passed as edible. I never cared much for her work circle, but I played along, shaking hands, nodding through conversations that barely held my attention. Emily, on the other hand, was in her element. She laughed at jokes I didn't quite catch, leaned in close when she spoke to her colleagues, and had a certain energy about her that didn't sit right with me. I told myself it was just networking, that this was what these events were meant for. But on the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She was unusually quiet in the passenger seat, her eyes locked on her phone as she scrolled through it, barely acknowledging me. Maybe she was tired, or maybe I was just overthinking things. At least, that's what I tried to tell myself. Then my phone buzzed. I normally wouldn't have checked it, especially while driving, but the silence in the car felt suffocating, and I needed some kind of distraction. One glance at the screen, and my breath caught in my throat. Unknown number. I thought you should know the truth about Emily. Check the photos. My hands went cold. Everything okay? She asked, her voice smooth and unconcerned. I tilted my phone slightly away from her before opening the message. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might be sick. The first photo, Emily in that navy dress, pressed intimately against another man. Not just standing next to him, not just a friendly gesture. Their faces were close, their bodies nearly fused together, her hand resting on his chest, the way she used to touch me. The second, his arm wrapped around her waist with a familiarity that made my blood run ice cold. The third, her looking up at him with a smile I hadn't seen in years. A look of warmth, excitement. Something that wasn't meant for me. My fingers tightened around the phone, my pulse hammering so loudly in my ears that I barely heard Emily speak again. "What's wrong?" she asked, glancing over at me. I couldn't answer. I couldn't even breathe. Because in that moment, I had to face the truth I had been avoiding for so long. I had already lost my wife. I just hadn't realized it until now. The weight of my phone suddenly felt unbearable, as if it carried the full force of everything I had just seen. I gripped the wheel harder, my knuckles turning white. My mind reeled, drowning in the images, the woman I had loved for years, pressed up against someone else, giving him a look that used to belong to me. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper. A connection. The kind you can't fake. The kind I thought we still had. I swallowed hard and stared straight ahead at the empty road. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows across the highway, stretching ahead of me like endless questions I didn't have the answers to. The car felt suffocating, the scent of her perfume clinging to the air. I had always loved that scent, but now it felt like a cruel reminder of the woman sitting just inches away from me, the woman who had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. Her voice cut through the silence. "Are you okay?" She sounded so casual, so normal, as if nothing had happened, as if my entire world hadn't just crumbled beneath me. I forced myself to glance at her, keeping my face neutral. How could she sit there so calmly while my heart was in pieces? How could she act like everything was fine? 1,000 words burned in my throat, but none of them made it out. My heartbeat roared in my ears, drowning out everything else. She was still scrolling through her phone, her thumb gliding effortlessly over the screen. The same fingers that had touched him. Had they lingered on his arm the way they used to on mine? Had she traced patterns on his skin the way she used to when we lay in bed at night? I inhaled sharply, trying to steady myself. I needed to ask. I had to know. "Who was that guy you were talking to tonight?" My voice came out steady, too steady. It didn't match the chaos inside me. She barely looked up. "Who?" I forced a small chuckle, though it felt like gravel in my throat. "The one in the navy suit. Tall. Dark hair. You seemed close." A small bait. Just to see how she reacted. She frowned slightly and finally set her phone down. Oh, that's just Greg. He's on the leadership team. We were just talking about a project. Just talking. Right. I could still see the way she had leaned into him, the way his hand had fit around her waist, like it wasn't the first time. I nodded slowly. Seemed like you were enjoying his company. Something flickered across her face, just for a split second. A hesitation. Then she forced a light laugh. You're overthinking things again. You do that, you know. That hit harder than it should have. She knew exactly what to say to make me second-guess myself. It had worked before. So many times, I had trusted her blindly. Brushed off the small things. Dismissed my own instincts. But not this time. Not when the proof was staring back at me from my screen. We pulled into the driveway. I cut the engine, and the car fell into heavy silence. She sighed, stretching before unbuckling her seatbelt. You coming inside? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I had built a life with. The woman I had trusted. The woman who had just spent the night wrapped up in someone else's arms. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it. I gripped the steering wheel long after she had disappeared inside, the soft glow of the porch light flickering in the distance. I should have followed her. Should have confronted her right then and there. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because at that moment, my mind was spinning. Replaying every glance, every stolen moment she had spent on her phone that night. How many times had I missed the signs? Had she always been this distant, or had I just refused to see it? And the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that somewhere along the way, I had been blind to the truth. A cold breeze drifted through the open car window, snapping me out of my daze. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone again, hesitating before unlocking it. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the photos were taken out of context. Maybe I was desperate for any excuse to avoid the reality that had just punched me in the gut. But when I reopened the message thread, the images were still there, taunting me. And then, right below them, another message popped up. Unknown number. Ask her about the hotel. My stomach clenched, my breath catching in my throat. The hotel. I stared at the words, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. This wasn't just some drunken mistake at a work event. This was planned. This was deliberate. And someone, whoever was sending me these messages, wanted me to know. I pushed the car door open, my legs feeling like they were moving through wet cement as I stepped out. The house was eerily quiet when I walked in. The scent of vanilla drifted through the air, her favorite candle burning somewhere in the distance. It was such a cruel contrast to the poison spreading through my veins. Upstairs, I heard the soft rustling of fabric. Emily was already in the bedroom, changing out of her dress, her back to me as she unzipped it. She was acting so normal, so unaffected, as if she hadn't just spent the night in another man's arms. I cleared my throat. She glanced over her shoulder, arching an eyebrow. You okay? I held up my phone. Someone sent me something tonight. Her expression didn't change, but I caught it, the tiniest flicker of tension in her shoulders. So small it could have been nothing. But I saw it. She turned to face me fully, casually slipping a robe over herself. What do you mean? I took a step forward, my pulse hammering. A message about you. She forced a light laugh, but there was something off about it. A little too airy. A little too controlled. That's weird. What did it say? I locked eyes with her, my voice calm, too calm. It asked me about a hotel. Silence. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. And that was all the confirmation I needed. The Emily I thought I knew, the version of her I had loved and trusted, would have scoffed, rolled her eyes, called it ridiculous. But this Emily, the one standing in front of me right now, she was calculating. She was stalling. Her voice came out too even. Who sent it? That's what she was worried about. I let out a humorless chuckle. Not what it means. Not why someone would send it. She hesitated, then shook her head. It's probably just spam or... Cut the crap, Emily. My voice was sharp, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. Her eyes widened slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I scoffed. "I saw the pictures." Her mouth opened, but I wasn't done. "I saw the way you looked at him. I saw the way he touched you." My voice wavered, but I didn't care. "You want to tell me it was nothing?" She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the edges of her robe. "It's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Then what is it?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty damn clear." She took a deep breath, and for the first time, I saw something real flicker in her eyes. Not guilt. Not remorse. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of the truth coming out. Something inside me cracked, broke, and fell away. The part of me that had still wanted to believe in her. The part that had trusted her for years. I stood there, the air between us thick with something darker than anger, colder than betrayal. It was the realization that the woman I had spent nearly a decade loving was a stranger. Or maybe she had always been this way, and I had just never seen it. Emily's fingers twitched slightly, as if she wanted to reach for me but thought better of it. Her throat worked like she was trying to swallow words that wouldn't come out. The glow from my phone illuminated the text message staring back at me. "Ask her about the hotel." I didn't need to ask. I already knew. But I wanted to hear her say it. I wanted to watch her try to lie to my face. So I prompted, my voice eerily calm. "Are you going to tell me the truth? Or do I have to start digging?" Her lips parted, her breath shallow. I don't know what you're talking about." That was it. That was the moment I knew she had already made her choice. She chose deception over honesty. She chose to insult me with a lie rather than give me the truth. Something inside me hardened. "Don't do that," I said, shaking my head slowly. "Don't stand there and pretend you don't know exactly what I'm talking about." She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders, forcing out a weak laugh. "You're being paranoid. I don't know who's messing with you, but Enough." My voice cut through the room like a blade. She clamped her mouth shut. And for the briefest second, I saw something else flicker across her face. Not regret. Not sorrow. Annoyance. Like I was inconveniencing her by catching her in her own web of lies. That realization sent a wave of nausea rolling through me. I had spent years thinking we were in this together. That we were a team. That our marriage was solid. But the truth was, she had already left me behind a long time ago. I took a deep breath. "Who is he?" She flinched. "Bullseye." Her pupils shrank. Her tongue dotted out to wet her lips. "I don't know what." I stepped closer, my voice low, dangerous. "If you say you don't know what I'm talking about one more time, I swear to God." She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. Like I was the one being unreasonable. Like she was the one trapped. "It's complicated," she muttered. I let out a bitter laugh. "That's the best you've got? It's complicated." She lifted her chin. "Because it is." A sharp pain shot through my chest, but I pushed it down. "How long?" Her gaze flicked away. "Just for a second." But it was enough. Long enough that she had to think about it. Long enough that it wasn't just some drunken mistake. Long enough to break me. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. "Jesus, Emily." She crossed her arms over her chest, looking away. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I let out a shaky breath. "And how was it supposed to happen?" She flinched at my tone. "I don't know." "You don't know?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "You don't know how long it's been? You don't know how it happened? You don't know what you were thinking?" I took another step forward. "Just tell me, Emily, what do you know?" Her breathing became uneven. I know I still love you." A sharp, bitter laugh tore out of me before I could stop it. "That's funny. That's really damn funny." She looked desperate now. "I do." "No, you don't," I snapped. "You don't get to say that. Not when you've been sneaking around behind my back. Not when I had to find out from a damn text message." Her lower lip trembled. And for the first time, she actually looked upset. But not for me. For herself. Because she got caught. I took a step back. Suddenly, I needed more space. More air. I need to think, I muttered. She reached for me, but I stepped away. Please don't, I whispered. I can't even look at you right now. And with that, I turned and walked out of the bedroom. For the first time in a long time, she looked as lost as I felt. But I wasn't lost anymore. I finally saw the truth. And it was only going to get worse from here. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat alone in the living room, staring blankly at the wall, my mind spinning in endless circles. The house was eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floor above me, where Emily was. Was she lying awake too, trying to come up with an excuse? Rehearsing her lies? Or was she already texting him, telling him that I knew, that things had gotten messy? The thought made my stomach churn. I had spent almost a decade with this woman. 7 years of marriage. I thought I knew her better than anyone. But now, sitting in the dark, I realized I knew nothing at all. My phone was still in my hand, the screen dimly lit with the last message from that unknown number. Ask her about the hotel. Who the hell was sending me this? A friend? A co-worker? Another scorned spouse? Or worse, was it him? Was this Wesley? Was he taunting me? Testing how much I could take before I snapped. My fingers tightened around the phone, my breath coming out in shallow bursts. I could call the number. Demand answers. But what good would that do? I already knew the truth. I just didn't know the details. And as much as I hated myself for it, I needed to know. I stood up abruptly, shoving my phone into my pocket as I moved toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last, the air thick with something unspoken. When I reached the bedroom door, I hesitated. Her side of the bed was empty. For a brief, terrifying second, panic shot through me. Had she left? Had she run? Then I heard it. The shower. A soft stream of water, muffled behind the bathroom door. She was still here. For now. I should have walked away. Should have waited until I had calmed down. But I couldn't. The need for answers burned too hot inside me. I pushed the bathroom door open. Steam rolled out, the scent of her floral shampoo thick in the air. She hadn't heard me come in. Her silhouette was visible through the fogged glass of the shower door, her arms wrapped around herself. Her shoulders looked smaller, hunched. She looked weak. Vulnerable. It was strange, seeing her like this. Seeing her without the confident, carefully crafted mask she always wore. But I couldn't let that change anything. I cleared my throat. She gasped, spinning around, her eyes wide. Jesus, Michael. You scared me. I ignored that. What hotel? Her expression shattered, just like that. Like a mirror thrown against pavement. I took a step closer. Don't play dumb. The one you've been sneaking off to. The one you thought I wouldn't find out about. She swallowed hard, reaching for a towel and wrapping it around herself before stepping out of the shower. Water dripped from her hair, her bare shoulders rising and falling with uneven breaths. I don't know what you're talking about. I laughed. It was ugly. Humorless. Someone sure as hell does. I pulled out my phone, holding up the message. So how about you quit wasting both our time and just tell me the truth? She was shaking now, but it wasn't from the cold. Her arms folded tightly around herself, her lips pressed together like she was trying to hold back the words that were desperate to escape. She hesitated. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Silence. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear it. It started 6 months ago. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. 6 months. Not a mistake. Not a one-time lapse in judgment. Half a damn year. I forced myself to stay still. To keep my breathing even. Who? She bit her lip, looking anywhere but at me. It doesn't matter. Wrong answer. It matters to me, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. So you either say his name, or I find out myself. A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper. Wesley. I didn't recognize the name. Somehow that made it worse. Who is he? She hesitated again, then let out a shaky breath. He's someone I met through work. Of course it was work. The late nights. The networking events. The sudden, unexplained weekend business trips. She looked up at me, her voice cracking. I never meant for it to go this far. I let out a slow, shuddering exhale. Then why did you? She didn't have an answer for that. Because there wasn't one. And no matter what she said next, I already knew. This wasn't something we could come back from. This was the beginning of the end. I stood there, gripping my phone like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. Wesley. Some faceless man. A name that meant nothing to me, yet had completely dismantled my life. Emily's lips trembled as she wrapped the towel tighter around herself, droplets of water still trickling down her skin, like she was trying to wash away the guilt. But no amount of scrubbing could erase the truth. 6 months. Half a year of lies. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. I wanted to scream, to yell, to demand explanations that would never make sense. But what would that change? The damage was already done. I knew who she was now, and no amount of words would put the shattered pieces of my trust back together. Emily took a hesitant step toward me, reaching out. I flinched before she could touch me. A flicker of something crossed her face. Regret? Pain? Annoyance? I couldn't tell anymore. I exhaled sharply. Her brows pulled together. What? Where did you meet him? Her hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. We met at one of the industry conferences a few months back. Which one? She swallowed hard. The one in Chicago. Chicago. I remembered that conference. It had been a big deal for her. I had helped her pack for it. Reassured her when she worried about whether her presentation would impress the higher-ups. And the whole time, she had already been in someone else's bed. I scoffed, shaking my head. So that's where it started. Emily shifted uncomfortably. It was just drinks at first. A conversation. I didn't think it would turn into anything. I let out a bitter laugh. And yet, 6 months later, here we are. She flinched. Michael, please. It's not like I planned for this to happen. I ignored her. Did you sleep with him in our bed? The question came out so suddenly, so raw, that it surprised even me. Her face drained of color. And that was my answer. My stomach twisted violently. A sharp, visceral reaction that left me gripping the bathroom sink just to steady myself. The thought of another man, Wesley, in my space. Touching her. Hearing the same laughter that once belonged to me. Jesus Christ. I didn't mean for it to. I held up a hand. Just stop. Emily's mouth snapped shut. But her eyes stayed locked on me. Wide. Desperate. I couldn't do this here. Not in our bedroom. Not in the house where we had built a life together. I needed air. I turned on my heel and walked out of the bedroom, ignoring the sound of her footsteps scrambling after me. Michael, wait. But I didn't. I grabbed my keys from the counter and headed straight for the front door. Where are you going? She asked, panic creeping into her voice now. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I could feel her standing behind me, waiting, hoping I'd stay, hoping she could spin another lie. I didn't turn around. Somewhere you're not. And with that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours. The city lights blurred past, streaks of neon and headlights mixing into a haze as I tried to process everything. My mind was a battlefield, flashes of old memories clashing violently with the brutal reality I had just uncovered. I had always believed our marriage was solid. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but I thought we always found our way back to each other. I thought we were a team. Now I realized it had all been an illusion, a carefully crafted lie I had convinced myself to believe. And the worst part, I didn't even know who to be angry at anymore. Her? Wesley. Myself. A part of me wanted to drive straight to whatever hotel they had been sneaking around in, demand to see the records, find out exactly when and where she had betrayed me. Another part of me wanted to find Wesley. Look him in the eye. See what kind of man willingly destroys a marriage without a second thought. But the logical part of me, the part still barely holding on, knew that none of that would fix anything. I pulled into a deserted parking lot, cutting the engine and letting the silence settle around me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I ran my fingers through my hair, exhaling shakily as I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the wheel. I had no idea what to do next. Divorce. That seemed inevitable. But could I handle it? Could I stomach the process of watching the life we built together crumble into legal paperwork and a division of assets? And I hated myself for even considering this. Was there a part of me that still wanted to fight for her? That thought disgusted me. I should be furious. I should be done. But love doesn't just disappear overnight. Even when you want it to. Suddenly, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another message from the unknown number. But it wasn't. It was a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Marshall. My older brother. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Then, almost on instinct, I did. Hey. There was a long pause on the other end before he finally spoke. You okay? My throat tightened. He didn't know what had happened. But somehow, he knew. And for the first time that night, I felt something crack inside me. I wasn't okay. And I didn't know if I ever would be again. The silence stretched between us, heavy and loaded with things I wasn't ready to say out loud. I stared out at the parking lot, the glow of streetlights bouncing off the windshield, making my reflection look warped. Unfamiliar. I barely recognized myself anymore. Mike, Marshall said carefully, his voice measured. He knew me too well. He knew something was wrong. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out at first. How do you even begin to explain something like this? That your wife, the woman you built your life with, the one you trusted with everything, had been sneaking around behind your back for 6 months? That while you were busy loving her, planning a future together, she was wrapped up in another man's sheets? I let out a slow breath, gripping the steering wheel. She's cheating. A sharp inhale on the other end. Then silence. Not shock. Not confusion. Just silence. Marshall was quiet for so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. But then he finally spoke, his voice lower now, edged with something I couldn't quite place. How do you know? I closed my eyes, the images flashing through my mind again. Her leaning into Wesley. His hand on her waist. The text messages. The hesitation in her voice when I confronted her. Every piece of evidence stacking on top of each other until the weight of it became unbearable. Someone sent me proof, I said finally. Pictures. Messages. Another pause. Then, Jesus Christ. I huffed out a humorless laugh. Yeah, that about sums it up. For a while, neither of us spoke. I could hear the faint hum of static from his end. The sound of him breathing. Processing. Marshall wasn't the kind of guy to throw out empty words. He thought before he spoke. And I needed that right now. Where are you? He asked eventually. Some parking lot, I muttered. I couldn't be in that house. A low exhale. Yeah, I get that. Of course he did. Marshall had been through something similar years ago. His fiancée had cheated on him, and I had watched it destroy him. I had been there for him. Listened to him rage. Let him crash on my couch for weeks when he couldn't stand to be alone. And now here we were. The roles reversed. You want me to come meet you? He offered. I hesitated. Did I? A part of me wanted to be alone. To sit in this misery and let it consume me. But another part of me, the part that was drowning, knew I needed something solid to hold on to. Yeah, I admitted. I think I do. Send me your location. I did. And then I just sat there, gripping my phone in my lap, staring at the dashboard without really seeing it. Emily hadn't called. Hadn't texted. I wasn't sure what that meant. Did she think I'd just cool off and come home? That we'd talk it through, somehow patch up the gaping hole she had blown in our marriage? Or was she relieved? Was she sitting in our bedroom right now, glad that I had left, because it meant she didn't have to face what she had done? The thought made me sick. I had spent so much time trying to be a good husband. I worked hard. I supported her. I gave her space when she needed it. Showed up when she asked. But apparently, none of that had been enough. Because while I was putting in the effort to build something lasting, she had been checking into hotels with another man. And the worst part? I still wasn't sure if I wanted to leave her. That thought disgusted me. I should be furious. I should be done. But love doesn't just disappear overnight. Even when you need it to. Headlights flashed in my rearview mirror. I looked up to see Marshall's car pulling into the space next to mine. He got out, shutting the door harder than necessary, his face set in a grim expression. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked around to my side of the car and leaned against the hood. I rolled down the window. "You didn't have to come," I muttered. He shrugged. "Yeah, I did." For a long moment, we just sat there in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was grounding. A reminder that I wasn't completely alone, even if it felt like it. Finally, Marshall spoke. "So, what's next?" I let out a breath. "I have no idea." He nodded slowly. "Do you want to fix it?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." "That's fair." I looked over at him. "What did you do after you found out about Cassie?" He exhaled, shaking his head. "Tried to drink myself into oblivion. That didn't help. Then I spent months pretending I was fine when I wasn't. That didn't help either." I let out a humorless chuckle. "So what did?" He was quiet for a moment, accepting that she wasn't the person I thought she was. I stared at my hands. Could I do that? Could I let go of the version of Emily I had spent so many years loving and accept that she was someone else now? Marshall glanced at me. "You don't have to decide tonight." He was right. But sooner or later, I would have to. And that terrified me. The night stretched on, heavy and endless, but I wasn't drowning in it anymore. Sitting in that parking lot next to my brother, I realized something. I had a choice. I could sit in the wreckage of my marriage, staring at the ruins, wondering where it all went wrong. Or I could stand up, step forward, and build something new. It wasn't an easy realization. The weight of Emily's betrayal still sat in my chest, pressing against my ribs like a stone. But for the first time since I saw those photos, since I read that message, since she admitted the truth, I felt like I could breathe. Marshall's voice cut through my thoughts. "Do you still love her?" I let the question sit between us, thick and suffocating. The answer wasn't simple. I had loved her for years. That kind of love doesn't just vanish overnight. But love without trust. It's like a house without a foundation. One hard shove, and it crumbles. I turned to him, the words forming before I fully realized them. "I think I love who I thought she was." He nodded, like that was the answer he expected. "That's the hardest part, man," he said. "Letting go of the version of her you built in your head." He was right. And it was time. I reached for my phone. Not to check for messages, because I already knew there were none. But to open my notes. There, staring back at me, was a list I had made years ago. Goals for the future. It was stupid. Something I had written on a whim one night, when Emily and I were newly married. Full of dreams and ambitions. Some of them were small. Learn to cook something other than takeout. Take more time off work. Call mom more often. But others hit harder now. Be the kind of man I want to be. No matter what happens. I swallowed hard. That was still in my control. I wasn't the man she had cheated on because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't the man who had been betrayed because I had failed her. Her choices weren't a reflection of me. They were a reflection of her. And I refused to let them define the rest of my life. Marshall nudged my arm. "Come crash at my place," he said. "You shouldn't go back there tonight." I let out a breath and nodded. "Yeah, okay." I followed him home. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was moving toward something. Something better. The weeks that followed weren't easy. But they were necessary. I filed for divorce. There was no screaming match. No dramatic confrontation. Just two people signing papers, knowing they were too broken to fix. She didn't beg me to stay. I think, deep down, she knew she had lost me the second she chose someone else. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt. It did. But every day, the weight got lighter. Every day, I felt more like myself again. I started running in the mornings, something I hadn't done since college. I took time off work and traveled for a while, seeing places I had always pushed off for someday. I reconnected with old friends, spent more time with my family, and most importantly, I stopped defining myself by my past. One night, months later, I was sitting at a bar in another city, nursing a drink, when someone sat down next to me. A woman. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. And when she spoke, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. I wasn't broken anymore. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what came next. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.